Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now. Carlos Alcaraz just confirmed his coaching situation for the Australian Open, and everyone's talking about it. You know that feeling when you hear news that just doesn't make sense at first? When something happens in tennis that makes you do a double take and wonder if you read it right. That's exactly what happened back in December when Carlos Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero announced they were going their separate ways. I remember seeing that post on social media and having to read it 3 times because it felt so unexpected. These two had been together for over 7 years. They'd won 6 Grand Slam titles together. They were literally just named Coach and Player of the Year. And then suddenly it was over. Just like that. The timing felt strange, the announcement felt emotional, and nobody really knew what was going to happen next. Would Carlos find a new coach right away? Would he struggle without Ferrero? Was this going to affect his game? Now we finally have some answers, and honestly, the situation is more interesting than I thought it would be. So here's what actually happened. Carlos Alcaraz walked into his pre-tournament press conference at the Australian Open and addressed the coaching situation for the first time publicly since the split. He's not bringing in some big-name coach. He's not making a dramatic change to his entire team. Instead, he's keeping things surprisingly similar to how they were before. Samuel Lopez, who's been his assistant coach and has been part of the team since the beginning of 2025, is now stepping into the main coaching role. That's it. No drama. No massive overhaul, just Lopez moving from the number 2 spot to the number 1 spot. And when you think about it, that actually makes a lot of sense because Lopez already knows the system, already knows Carlos, and already helped him win 5 titles last year. But still, the whole situation feels different because Ferrero was more than just a coach to Alcaraz. He was like a mentor, almost a second father figure. Someone who had been there since Carlos was just a kid with big dreams. The really interesting part is how calm Carlos seems about the whole thing. When he talked to the media in Melbourne, he didn't seem stressed or worried or like he was trying to convince himself everything would be fine. He just sounded like someone who had made a decision and was comfortable with it. He mentioned that the team is basically the same, except for one person. The routines haven't changed. The practices have been going well. He feels good. He's excited. That's the vibe he was giving off. And he was really clear about being grateful for those 7 years with Ferrero, saying he learned so much and that Ferrero helped make him the player he is today. But at the same time, he talked about it like it was just time for that chapter to close. Like, sometimes in life, you reach a point where things need to change, even when everything seems to be going great. That's a pretty mature way to look at it for someone who's only 22 years old. What makes this whole coaching change even more fascinating is the timing. Carlos is heading into the Australian Open, trying to do something really special. He's already won the French Open twice, Wimbledon twice, and the US Open twice. But he's never won the Australian Open. In fact, his best results there have been 2 quarter-final runs. And that's it. He's never really found his rhythm in Melbourne the way he has at other Grand Slams. So this tournament represents a massive opportunity for him. If he wins, he becomes the youngest man ever to complete the career Grand Slam. That's a huge deal. That's the kind of achievement that puts you in the history books forever. And he's trying to do it without the coach who helped him win all those other majors. The pressure is real. The stakes are high. And everyone's watching to see if he can pull it off. Now let's talk about Samuel Lopez for a second because he's not exactly a random guy they picked up off the street. Lopez has been working with Carlos since early 2025, so he's already been part of some incredible achievements. He was there for all 5 titles that Alcaraz won last year. He knows the game plan. He knows Carlos's strengths and weaknesses. He knows how to communicate with him. And according to reports from Spanish media, Lopez has been doing a great job in the lead-up to this tournament. The practices have been solid. Carlos has been working hard. They've been focusing on specific parts of his game, like his backhand return, which he mentioned needs improvement after his second-round match against Yannick Hanfmann. The wind in Melbourne has been tricky to deal with, and Carlos is being honest about the areas where he needs to get better. That kind of self-awareness is important, and it shows that Lopez is helping him stay focused on the details that matter. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Multiple reports from major Spanish tennis outlets are suggesting that Carlos might actually be looking for a new main coach even while Lopez is handling things right now. So Lopez might just be a temporary solution while Alcaraz figures out who he wants to work with long term. That would make sense in a way. You don't want to rush into a coaching decision right before a Grand Slam. You want to take your time, see who's available, figure out who would be the best fit for where you want to go with your career. And in the meantime, having Lopez there keeps everything stable and familiar. It's like a bridge between the old coaching situation and whatever comes next. Some people think Alcaraz might eventually find his way back to Ferrero, that maybe they just needed some time apart to reset and figure things out. Other people think he'll bring in a completely new voice, someone who can offer a fresh perspective and help him reach that next level. The Australian tennis legend Mark Woodford had some interesting thoughts on this whole situation. He said there's basically an asterisk next to Alcaraz's name right now. Everyone's going to be watching him extra closely to see how he performs without Ferrero by his side. That's a lot of pressure to deal with. But at the same time, pressure can be motivating. Some athletes thrive when everyone's doubting them or questioning whether they can handle a new situation. And Carlos has shown throughout his career that he's pretty good at handling pressure. The guy's won 6 Grand Slams before turning 23. He's been the #1 player in the world. He's beaten the best players on the biggest stages, so maybe this extra scrutiny will actually bring out the best in him. What's really been interesting to watch is how Carlos has been performing so far at the Australian Open. He's won his first 3 matches in straight sets against Adam Walton, Yannick Hanfmann, and Corentin Moutet. He hasn't dropped a set yet, and even though he was critical of himself after the Hanfmann match, his team apparently told him he played better than he thought he did. That's such a typical athlete thing, right? Sometimes you're your own worst critic, and you don't realize how well you're actually doing until someone points it out to you. The fact that Lopez and the rest of the team are giving him that kind of perspective and encouragement is really important. It shows they're working well together, even in this new dynamic. Now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Jannik Sinner, because Carlos isn't just trying to win his first Australian Open. He's trying to do it while Sinner is going for his 3rd consecutive title in Melbourne. The Italian won the Australian Open in 2024 and 2025, and he's looking absolutely unstoppable right now. These two players have basically dominated men's tennis over the past year. They've shared the last 8 Grand Slam titles between them. They've played in the last 3 Grand Slam finals. Their rivalry is incredible to watch because they're both so young and so talented, and they keep pushing each other to get better. But that also means the path to victory for Carlos goes straight through Sinner. And beating Sinner in Melbourne, where he's won twice already and clearly loves the conditions, is going to be incredibly difficult. Barbara Schett, a former world #7 and current tennis analyst, made a really interesting point about the Alcaraz-Sinner dominance. She said the gap between these two and the rest of the field is huge. Maybe bigger than it's ever been, even bigger than when Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic were dominating. Back in those days, you had guys like Andy Murray and Stan Wawrinka who could occasionally break through and win majors. But right now, it feels like if you're not named Carlos Alcaraz or Jannik Sinner, your chances of winning a Grand Slam are pretty slim. That's both amazing and kind of crazy when you think about it. 2 guys in their early 20s are just that much better than everyone else. And the question now is whether Carlos can maintain that level without Ferrero in his corner. The way the split happened is still a bit mysterious. Alcaraz and Ferrero both said it was a mutual decision, but Ferrero has given interviews where he seemed genuinely sad about it and said he didn't really want it to end. There have been reports that it came down to contractual and financial reasons, which is kind of disappointing if true, because you'd hope that after 7 years together and all that success, they could work out whatever business disagreements they had. But sometimes these things are more complicated than they seem from the outside. Maybe there were other issues that haven't been made public. Maybe they just reached a point where they had different visions for the future. Carlos mentioned wanting to do certain improvements and train in specific ways, and maybe Ferrero wasn't on board with that direction. We might never know the full story. One thing that's been really touching is how respectful both of them have been about each other. Carlos's initial announcement on social media back in December was emotional and grateful. He talked about Ferrero turning childhood dreams into reality. He acknowledged everything they accomplished together. And Ferrero has been equally complimentary, talking about how proud he is of Carlos and how much he enjoyed working with him. Even though the split happened, there doesn't seem to be any bad blood between them. They're still friends, according to Carlos. They closed that chapter in a way that was mutual and respectful. That's not always how these coaching changes go in professional tennis. Sometimes they get messy and people start throwing blame around. But this one, despite being surprising and a bit sad, has been handled with a lot of class by both sides. The timing of the split also raised a lot of eyebrows, because it came right after Ferrero won the ATP Coach of the Year award along with Samuel Lopez. Like, literally days after receiving that honor, the partnership was over. It felt jarring. How do you go from being recognized as the best coaching team in tennis to splitting up? But maybe that's exactly why it made sense to them. They reached the highest point. They achieved everything they could achieve together. And sometimes when you're at the top, that's actually the best time to make a change, because you're going out on a high note. You're not ending things because of failure or frustration. You're ending things because you accomplished what you set out to accomplish. And now it's time for both people to explore new adventures and new projects, which is exactly how Carlos described it in his announcement. During the off-season, there were all kinds of reports about what Carlos was doing to prepare for the Australian Open. He spent about 25 days training in his hometown region of Murcia, Spain. He was working on hard courts, doing fitness training, refining his technique. He even brought in Italian player Flavio Cobolli as his main training partner, which is smart because Cobolli is a high-level player who can push Carlos and simulate competitive intensity. There were photos of Carlos training on Christmas Eve, which shows just how dedicated he is to this career. While most people are celebrating with their families and taking it easy, he's out there grinding on the practice court. That's the kind of commitment it takes to be number one in the world. Carlos also made some technical changes during the off-season. He adjusted his serve mechanics, which is a big deal because your serve is such a fundamental part of your game. He also added 5 grams of lead to his racket, which might not sound like much but can actually make a significant difference in how the racket feels and performs. These are the kinds of small details that players at the highest level obsess over, because when you're competing against someone like Sinner, every tiny advantage matters. The margins are so thin at the top of the sport that something as simple as a slight change in racket weight or serve motion can be the difference between winning and losing. The Australian Open has always been a bit of a puzzle for Carlos. He's won everywhere else. He's dominated on clay at Roland Garros. He's incredible on grass at Wimbledon. He's conquered the hard courts at the US Open. But Melbourne has been his kryptonite. He's reached the quarterfinals twice in 2024 and 2025, but hasn't been able to go further. Last year, he lost to Novak Djokovic in 4 sets, and that match highlighted some of the challenges he faces in Melbourne. The conditions there are unique. The courts are a bit different than other hard court tournaments. The weather can be hot and windy, and for whatever reason, Carlos just hasn't been able to put together his best tennis when it matters most at this particular tournament. But maybe this year is different. Maybe the coaching change, as disruptive as it might seem, is actually what he needs to break through in Melbourne. Sometimes a fresh perspective or a slightly different approach can unlock something that wasn't working before. Lopez brings a different energy than Ferrero, even though they were both part of the same team. The dynamics are different now. The responsibility is different. And Carlos seems energized by it rather than intimidated. He keeps talking about wanting to improve, wanting to fix the things that aren't working, wanting to get better. That growth mindset is crucial, especially when you're trying to accomplish something you've never done before. The fourth round match against Tommy Paul is coming up, and that's going to be a good test. Paul is ranked 32 in the world, and he's a solid player who can make things difficult if you're not focused. But Carlos should be the favorite in that match. The real challenges will come if he makes it to the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. That's where he'll potentially face players like Djokovic, Sinner, or other top competitors who can really push him, and that's where we'll see if the coaching change has affected him in any meaningful way. Can he handle the pressure moments without Ferrero there to guide him? Can Lopez provide the tactical adjustments and mental support that Carlos needs when things get tight? These are the questions that will be answered over the next week or so. One thing that's been interesting is how Carlos talks about his relationship with his team. He mentioned that he often sees things differently than his team does after a match. Like, he'll think he played poorly, and they'll point out all the good things he did, or vice versa. That kind of back and forth is really valuable because it keeps you grounded and gives you a more balanced perspective on your performance. With Ferrero, that dynamic was well established over 7 years. With Lopez now in charge, they're still figuring out that rhythm, but it seems to be working so far based on what Carlos has said. The fact that he felt better about his match after talking to his team shows that they're communicating well and that Lopez is able to give him the reassurance and perspective he needs. The media has been going crazy trying to analyze every little detail of this coaching situation. Every press conference answer gets dissected. Every practice session gets photographed and reported on. Everyone wants to know if Carlos is really okay or if he's just putting on a brave face. But from everything we've seen and heard, it seems like he genuinely is handling this well. He's not someone who overthinks things or gets paralyzed by big decisions. He's always been pretty instinctual and confident in his choices, and that personality trait is serving him well right now. He made a decision to move on from Ferrero, he's committed to working with Lopez, and he's focused on the task at hand, which is winning the Australian Open. The tennis world is fascinating because sometimes the storylines off the court are just as compelling as what happens on the court. And this Alcaraz coaching situation is one of those storylines that everyone's invested in. People are rooting for him to succeed. People want to see if he can complete the career Grand Slam. People are curious about whether he'll find a new coach or stick with Lopez long term. And all of that adds an extra layer of intrigue to what's already one of the most important tournaments of the year. Whether you're a hardcore tennis fan or just someone who casually follows the sport, this is a story worth paying attention to because it could define the next chapter of Carlos Alcaraz's career. Looking at the bigger picture, this is a 22-year-old who's already accomplished things that most tennis players only dream about. 6 Grand Slam titles, multiple #1 rankings, wins over every major rival. And he's doing all of this while navigating the complexities of professional sports, dealing with injuries, managing relationships with coaches and team members, and trying to keep improving at a time when he's already one of the best in the world. That's not easy. The fact that he's handling this coaching transition with maturity and focus speaks to his character and his mental toughness. These are the kinds of challenges that either make you stronger or break you down, and so far, Carlos seems to be getting stronger. The next few weeks are going to tell us a lot. If Carlos wins the Australian Open with Lopez as his coach, it validates the decision to split from Ferrero and shows that he can succeed in different coaching environments. If he struggles or falls short, people will inevitably wonder if the timing of the split was a mistake. But either way, this is just one chapter in what's going to be a long and incredible career. Carlos has so many years ahead of him, so many opportunities to win more titles, so many chances to work with different coaches and continue evolving as a player. The Ferrero era was amazing, but it's over now. And the question is, what comes next? How does he build on everything he learned during those 7 years? How does he take his game to an even higher level? How does he cement his legacy as one of the all-time greats? What's cool about watching someone like Carlos is that you're witnessing greatness in real time. You're seeing history being made. And moments like this coaching change, as controversial or surprising as they might be, are part of that story. They're the plot twists that make the journey interesting. They're the challenges that test whether someone is truly great or just really good. And based on everything we've seen from Carlos Alcaraz throughout his career, he has what it takes to handle this moment and come out on the other side even better than before. So here's where we are right now. Carlos Alcaraz has confirmed that Samuel Lopez is his coach for the Australian Open. The team is mostly the same. The routines are familiar. He feels good about where things are at. He's won his first 3 matches without dropping a set. He's focused on improving specific parts of his game. He's chasing history with a chance to become the youngest man to complete the career Grand Slam. And he's doing all of this in the spotlight, with everyone watching, wondering, and debating whether this coaching change was the right move. The answer to that question will probably become clearer over the next week as the tournament progresses, and we see how Carlos handles the pressure and the competition. One thing's for sure, though. This is a massive moment in Carlos Alcaraz's career. The decisions he makes now, the way he performs in Melbourne, the direction he takes with his coaching situation, all of this is going to shape his future in significant ways. And as tennis fans, we get to watch it all unfold. We get to see how one of the most talented players of this generation navigates a challenging situation and tries to achieve something special. That's what makes sports so compelling. The uncertainty, the drama, the human element of people trying to accomplish extraordinary things while dealing with all the complications that come with being a professional athlete. If you've been following Carlos's career from the beginning, you know this guy has always found a way to rise to the occasion. He's clutch in big moments. He's resilient when things get tough. He's willing to take risks and play aggressive tennis even when the stakes are highest. Those qualities don't disappear just because your coach isn't there anymore. They're part of who he is as a player and as a person. So while the coaching change adds an interesting wrinkle to this Australian Open, it doesn't fundamentally change what Carlos is capable of. He's still one of the 2 best players in the world. He's still hungry to win. He's still improving and learning. And that's a dangerous combination for everyone else in the draw. As we watch the rest of this tournament unfold, pay attention to the little things. How does Carlos handle tight moments? How does he respond when things aren't going his way? How does his team support him during changeovers and between sets? How does he adjust his tactics when his opponent is giving him problems? These are the areas where coaching really matters, and they're the areas where we'll see if Lopez can fill the void left by Ferrero. It's going to be fascinating to watch, and regardless of what happens, we're getting a front-row seat to one of the most interesting storylines in tennis right now. The Australian Open is just getting started, and already there's so much to talk about. But the Carlos Alcaraz coaching situation is definitely one of the biggest stories. It's got everything: drama, intrigue, high stakes, a legendary player trying to make history, a surprising split from a beloved coach, questions about the future, and all of it is happening at one of the most important tournaments of the year. So if you haven't been paying attention to tennis lately, now's a great time to tune in. Because what happens over the next week in Melbourne could define Carlos Alcaraz's legacy and answer a lot of questions about what happens when a great player makes a bold decision about their team. It's going to be must-watch tennis, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. If you found this video helpful and want to stay updated on everything happening with Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open and beyond, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on the coaching change and whether you think Carlos can win his first Australian Open title. And if you're excited about this tournament and want to see more tennis content, give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the